So how do we ensure that this all is kept under control? I think this entire field, I tend to call it A-identity. So the intersection of AI and identity is still pretty much a wide space on our technology map. We see a lot of startups around AI security nowadays, but I think we need startups around AI identity.
It seems to me that technology, the functionality is going to blaze way past security. So it happened with cloud infrastructure, I think. And I think it'll happen again. I think the fallback will be some sort of leveraging legacy permissions, which we already know are not good enough. I think that's maybe what you're referencing. You have these super users, system administrators. So does that mean the system administrator can start using AI to find out all kinds of information about the company or information that they shouldn't have access to?
Even think about someone having access to the AI, which, by the way, brings us back to the initial theme. Verified identities. So is it really Martin using the AI? And what is the AI supposed to do in the context of Martin? And if it's not Martin, or if someone is using the AI in different contexts, there might be way more information that is gathered, even if the AI is sort of constrained in what it can do in the context of the individual. I think this is a very interesting field to think about for 2025.
This is Identity at the Center. If it has anything to do with IAM, this is the go-to podcast. Now your hosts, Jim McDonald and Jeff Stedman.
Welcome to the Identity at the Center podcast. I'm Jeff, and that's Jim. Hey, Jim.
Hey, Jeff. How are you?
Oh, not so bad. Yourself?
Doing great. This episode is going to drop on January 20th, which is also the same day as the college football national championship game. So in honor of that, I wore my Georgia Bulldogs t-shirt, but unfortunately, the Georgia Bulldogs will not be playing in that game. But I can always dream. There's always next year. You're a Chicago fan. You've got to be used to saying that by now.
Well, I am a Chicago fan. I don't really follow college football, so I could care less what's going on there. But I am a Chicago Bears fan. And, well, there's always next year has been our phrase for about the last 40 years. So yeah, I can empathize that. When you stood up there for a second, I thought you were going to flash us, or you had your chest painted or something like a super fan. I'm a little disappointed that we didn't get to see that side.
What are you trying to drive people to YouTube or what?
Yeah, exactly. Hey, anything we can do to go viral, Jim? Come on, do it for the views.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we'll talk about identity. We'll talk about AI. I think that'll have to drive our views for now.
Yeah, let's focus on the conversation. But I think before we get to that, let's talk about EIC 2025, because you and I are going to be there for the first time in Berlin, Germany. It's May 6th to the 9th. And like I mentioned, Jim and I will be there. We've got a discount code for everyone who is willing to show their support and partake in that. The code is IDAC25MKO, and that gets you 25% off. Don't worry about remembering that right now. I'll have it in our show notes, and you'll be able to find it easily on our website. It's right on our homepage. So I'm looking forward to that. First time in Berlin. We're going to ask our guests some questions about that probably towards the end of our conversation around what should I be doing in Berlin, first time there. But I'm looking forward to it. What about you, Jim?
Oh, I can't wait. I've never been to Berlin either. I've also never been to Munich, which I think is where EIC was in past years. So maybe in the future, if it's moved to Munich, we'll get to go there as well. But I'm excited. I've never been to Berlin. I've been to Frankfurt. That's about it. So, yeah, I love experiencing new cultures, and I love German food. There's a German food restaurant near me at home, and I'm kind of boring. I get the schnitzel every time, but I do that at every restaurant. Once I find what I like, I kind of stick to it.
Yeah, I'm the same way with chicken and waffles. So maybe we'll see how that works. You're way ahead too. You've already booked your flight. I have not, and my wife and I are trying to figure out how we're going to do all this because she's probably going to join me out there. And then, we're planning on trying to hit other areas. So we haven't even figured out what we're going to do yet. And so I know I'm behind where you're at right now, Jim.
Yeah, I'm going to be out there the week before, flying into Oslo, meeting a bunch of Identirati in Oslo, the local Identirati. I haven't figured out exactly what we're going to do after that, but I'm thinking I'm leaning toward like an urban vacation, right? So this is like a vacation week. Definitely meeting folks from Norway the first couple of days. And then we weren't sure if we were going to drive through the countryside of Norway, which is absolutely spectacular from what I've seen on YouTube and things like that. Or we're going to go to Stockholm and Copenhagen. That's kind of option 2. I guess there's a third wildcard option, which I don't know what that is. But if we do Stockholm and Copenhagen, I'd like to try to find local Identirati in those locations. So if you're listening and you live near those cities or in those cities, reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'd love to, meet and have a beer.
And I'm sure you'll have stickers with you too, right?
Oh, of course. Yeah. I got to stock up my bag.
All right. Well, why don't we get to our guest? He is the founder and principal analyst with KuppingerCole. Welcome back to the show for the 5th time, Martin.
Really? Number 5 already?
Number
Wow.
5. Yep.
Yes,
Jim's in charge of all of our. Look, we always like having you on. It seems like we have you on every maybe like 9 to 12 months. Kind of seems to be kind of the thing. You've been very gracious along with EIC to invite Jim and I to come out there, and we're looking forward to, again, our first time being there. We have actually a lot that we want to cover today. So I'm not going to ask you about your background and all that stuff because you've been on the show 5 times. Go back and listen to previous episodes of Martin if that's what interests you. But why don't we just jump right into it? Because I think there's a lot of topics that people are interested in and seem to be gaining steam in this space. And the first one is identity verification. It seems like the last couple conferences I've been to, Gartner, Identity Week, and last year's Identiverse, seem to have much more prevalence of these types of identity verification tools. And I think it's starting to pick up, at least in the US, especially around things like fraud and being able to accurately identify who's on the other end, right? Kind of the know your customer type thing, but it seems to be expanding. I'm curious from your perspective as someone who really knows, the IAM space at large, where do you see the identity verification market and how does this look for 2025? Do you think it is still ascending? Is it sort of reached a peak or are we kind of in a stable platform now?
Yeah. So before we come to that, maybe just a few comments on German towns.
Okay.
So Berlin is great. It's the largest town. It's a bit edgy, but it has something. Munich also nice. You have the mountains close to it, etc. Frankfurt, we may discuss about it, but I personally believe the place to be is Stuttgart, where I live. Just as a little advert for my hometown. Really, really nice town. But clearly a lot of nice places. If you ever travel in Germany, let me know. I usually know some quite nice places to go in Germany and Europe. Anyway, identity verification. It is essential because at the end of the day, everything we do in security, or most we do in security at least, and when you look at zero trust, for instance, it starts with identity. It's Martin using a device to authenticate, but is it really Martin? And I think this is the big question behind identity verification. Is this really Martin? Can we assure that it is him or someone or something else? So identity verification is important, and we need different levels of assurance for depending on what we are doing. So it's not everything is based on a super strong verification. There clearly are different levels, and we have this in the concepts for level of assurance, etc. So it's not, nothing fundamentally new. I personally believe that we'll see a strong uptake. We definitely will see a strong uptake over here in Europe, because when the EU digital identity wallets, the UDI wallets, come out in 2026 or a bit later, then a verified identity will be an essential element within this decentralized identity and wallet concept. So we will need to do the verification. We also, I think, need to move forward, and this is what for instance, decentralized identity will allow, to be able to reuse identity verification. We need to make it also, or simplify it, especially what I really don't like is everything where you have a human involved in the verification. So because these things tend to be cumbersome, even for me. And I would say I'm a somewhat experienced IT user, and if I feel this is really cumbersome and complex, then it's probably not an ideal solution yet. So yes, we need to do it. The question I would raise is how will this look like in the future? So what do we do? How do we reuse it? Maybe at some point, when you look at all the shared signal stuff, maybe even have enough or sufficient signals that we can be assured that it is Martin, because it's the device, it's the location, it's the things that are done, etc. Maybe we can at some point use signals and maybe even that need to authenticate in a traditional manner anymore. So I think there are a lot of things we can think about, we can discuss, where we are just still at the beginning. So I think identity verification is a market that will grow because we need it. We need assured identity, but we need also to make it very smooth, very simple, and reusable, because, as I've said, the most annoying thing is if you have to go through cumbersome processes again and again and again.
Yeah, it's interesting how you started off with the focus on levels of assurance. My first use case that I ran into regarding identity verification was with a university in the U.S. And actually, I don't think that it was University of Texas, right? So all people who were on campus had to show up and present their driver's license or some other government issued ID in order to get a school ID, and then in order to get a set of credentials, to elevate their credentials so they can access certain applications. This was around the 2013, 14 timeframe. So this was quite a while ago, 10 years ago. All that was not a big deal because it was all very pre-COVID, and it was a very on-premise group of people. However, they did have satellite locations. I believe one was in Israel, and the folks there in Israel, they still had to go through this identity verification process, but they couldn't fly all the way to Austin, Texas to do it. So it required like faxing and, scanning their IDs and things like that. So it became such a cumbersome process for those folks. Now, fast forward to today, you talked about the process where we do identity verification for, in the United States, we have to do it for submitting our taxes online, or to access the IRS website. It can be very cumbersome. I mean, the process itself is pretty smooth, but if it can't recognize your ID or it doesn't recognize a match, then it needs to go to a human. You might have to wait 45 minutes to get in with a human. It's very cumbersome. Yes. So kind of in my book anyway, it's like the level of assurance, we'd like to have identity verification for anything that's more than maybe social media.
Yeah.
But it's too cumbersome.
Yeah. And interesting, when you take the IRS use case, it is something you must do. When you apply for a job, it's something you want to do, or for the university, for the higher education. But if you go to e-commerce, you just may say, okay, then I go somewhere else. If you go if you deal with telcos, with banks, all these use cases. So if bank account opening is too complex with the one bank, you go to the next one, maybe. These are things where it's really about the business. In some scenarios, it is just that you're obliged to do it. So they so to speak, a government can afford to keep it complex because people must do it. Others can't. And so we need to make it, to simplify it. I think this is a very important point. But you bring up also an interesting aspect. When I go back to my keynote, I think it was last year's EIC, I talked about decentralized identity. And one of my samples was a flow that goes from the sort of the initial verification to access to IT systems. When you're working, for instance, as a consultant at a customer. So you have the verification in your wallet, and then you can onboard to an employer because you have a verified identity. In that case, you can do the onboarding to the employer. That employer adds additional verifiable credentials like you're at KuppingerCole Analysts, you're the principal analyst or a principal analyst. With that information, then you may say, okay, I'm in a project at company X, and the company X then says, okay, you're employed there, you're really Martin Kuppinger. They have the data, which saves them, by the way, a ton of money. When you also have been working in consulting at other companies, and sometimes you spend really hours for just getting a badge. You can automate everything. You can simplify this process, and you don't pay an advisor or a consultant half a day for nothing. That doesn't make sense, but we can avoid it. And then you could say, okay, and right now Martin is in this project and this role, and in an ideal world, the access to whatever the tools, the websites, the information would be granted automatically based on all the attributes. Zero friction by just one identity verification. Real massive process cost savings. Higher security, all doable. So we need it, and we need to get much better on that. And we need, I think, again, back to the level of assurance. What I feel is also around the EUDI wallet frequently is a challenge is that a lot of people, especially in Germany, being a bit more paranoid on that side, maybe on average, we're thinking about always the highest level of assurance. We don't need the highest level of assurance for everything. We need it only for very few use cases. Even in government interactions, for many of the things, we don't need the highest level of assurance. We can do today a lot of things where we don't need the highest level of assurance. And that is where we should think about what is it really, how can we do this created, but clearly if we have a reusable, verifiable identity in place, it's super powerful. What I fear is that we end up with 100 wallets from 100 banks. Doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. Don't go for individual wallets. Go for reusable identities.
Yeah, that's where I share that same fear, because at any given point, people are going to trust or not trust any of these wallets. And so what's the point of having multiple wallets? The whole point of one wallet to keep everything. If I have to carry around 7 or 8 or 10 different wallets, that totally defeats the purpose. Now we just created another version of the password. And that's what I'm most afraid of in this decentralized sort of idea is trust. At any given point, and I'll just speak on the US side, half the population doesn't trust the government. Doesn't matter who's in charge. The other half doesn't like that. So, if government isn't an option, then what is? Is it education? Well, not everybody is in education. Is it healthcare? Not everyone, at least in the US, has healthcare. Is it finance? Not everyone, may have the same financial, access, things like that. So I am concerned about that, just like you mentioned, Martin.
I don't believe that we only will have one wallet. It will be probably more than one wallet. And we also probably should think about this not really as a wallet, because there will be so much in that it's way too big for a wallet. It's really more than that. It's a drawer or even a set of this. But I believe that we will have more than one, partially for the trust reasons. You may use the government one only for the things where you deal with the government. But you don't want to have many. So the number will be, I will personally believe, a relatively low number. I thought a lot about it. I could envision that that we will see also very much purpose-built wallets like a travel wallet that not only sort of holds the information but helps you managing all the travel, etc., which could be interesting business case, things like that. I think this is probably more likely to happen when we look at this world of wallets. The other thing is trust. I think what we also should think about is how can we build trust? We can build trust by having one strong proof. Okay, we trust the government or not. And we could also say, if we have a lot of, call it signals again, that hint in the same direction, we also can build trust. Because I think that's not exact mathematics because there are overlaps there. But at the end of the day, if one signal has a 90% probability, it also means it has a 10% probability of failing. If you have a second signal that also has a 10% probability of failing, and these are not overlapping, then the probability of failing would be not 10%, but 0.011%. So if you have many signals and combine them, and they hint in the right direction, this is clearly a lot of algorithm stuff, etc., and thinking about how do you do it properly. But and what is when some signal hints in the opposite direction. But basically, you can build a lot of trust on weaker signals if you have enough of them.
I think the only thing that can build trust in the current world is openness, open standards, that you can't go and hide things behind the scene, that there is some kind of agreed upon standard. Maybe there's some independent third party or multiple third parties that verify that this wallet meets the standard. But I wanted to...
Again, the standard is one thing, but then you have a verified identity in the wallet. The wallet complies to the standard. But do you trust that verification? And that's, again, the point. Who was the verifier? That's maybe something, if we go through that verification more than once, so we have a reusable identity, but we have 3 independent verifications in the same wallet, then someone can pick and say, okay, I don't trust that party, but if this and this also verified it, then it probably is correct. So that might be the way we should think about it.
That's
we
right.
If one verification in.
If you're talking about like age verification or something like that, whether or not you trust the government, you probably trust the driver's license that says the person's 21 and can buy this bottle of liquor or something like that. So you might not inherently say, I trust the government with all my private information, yet most of us go and get government issued IDs because you can't do anything in the world without it. You touched on the enterprise use case for identity verification. I feel that's something that has always resonated with me, where I could bring in a new employee, lives nowhere close to an office. I know I've joined companies and not gone to offices for the first year or more without going to one of the physical locations. So I've always thought, like, if you could do the identity verification process for those people, especially, but also like to fill in, we have a form in the US called, I think it's the I-9, where it's like basically you get into the tax system that, hey, you now work here. And all that, the data is the same. If you could bring that and just plug it in, I think that the idea is great, but I don't see many companies saying, all right, that's a big enough of a problem for me to go out and buy a product to solve that issue. Even if I have a lot of employees, say 100,000 employees, I probably don't have a big enough of a use case in one central HR system where, that wouldn't be an integration nightmare. Now, however, if it was a feature of a product that I already own, I might flip the switch and start using that feature, at least for some subset of the use case. So long way of getting to my question, which is identity verification. Is it a standalone product, or should it be, or a feature of something else like your identity management system?
Service. Short answer. So you had this long question, so I decided for the short answer.
The answer is I almost missed it.
You stunned Jim,
must
Martin.
be a service that can be consumed and integrated.
Yeah. So a service that can be consumed and integrated into your onboarding, however that takes place.
Exactly.
Okay.
So I don't think that it makes sense to take the technology again and again and again. So my colleague Annie currently is working on a leadership compass on identity verification, and I think her preliminary list was in the 300 plus vendor range.
300 plus vendors. Okay. Wow.
Okay. So, and all doing it a bit different. So selecting the ones and saying, okay, this is the ones we look at in this leadership compass is not an easy thing. Yeah.
Okay. So this gets me thinking about, so I think what you're basically talking about is like orchestrating some kind of onboarding workflow to tap into a third-party service that would then, verify the credential, redirect back, let the company know the person's been verified, et cetera.
Unless you do it with decentralized identities, which would be definitely for the future the smartest way to do it.
Okay.
So
and speaking of the future,
yeah, that would be, I believe, the smartest way to do it. And it's like you have whatever a badge, a corporate badge, etc., for entering the building, etc. You also can either add something to a wallet, makes more sense, or issue your corporate wallet if you really want to go down that path. But it's still then you have ways to do that in a smart manner and reuse things, and then the service would be basically serving sort of the ones who are issuing the credentials into the wallets or to the holder correctly. I think it's also something we need to be very, very precise on. The basic decentralized identity model is not a wallet model. It's a issuer to holder to verifier, where the wallet is just the technical means to hold verifiable credentials. So we anyway put way too much emphasis on the wallet and not on the holder. And that's also why I believe we should think always about people having more than one wallet, having the same credential in multiple wallets, etc., giving them the choice, because this is really the holder focused on the thinking, which makes more sense than the wallet thinking of today.
Interesting. So I've been wanting to figure out how to bring up this topic. So I've been watching a lot of videos lately around AI agents. The idea is that the AI agents are, like people. They can do things, but they're also like applications. I saw a video with Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, talking about AI agents. He says AI agents are going to replace SaaS. That's a big statement, but coming from him, I put some trust in that, right? I mean, he's a visionary. It gets me to also thinking, I'm going to shortcut to, I go to a lot of identity conferences. Every product is now AI enabled. I noticed on your website, on one of your announcements, KuppingerCole is now AI enabled as well. So in November, you announced Martin the Chatbot. I was wondering if you could tell us about Martin the Chatbot.
Yeah, so first I have to say, it wasn't me who announced it, and it wasn't me who came up with the name. So when I heard about that they intend to call it Martin, I said, oh no, come on. But I gave up on this conversation. Basically, to be honest, our KuppingerCole website, we hadn't a good search functionality for many, many years. So it was really not good. So I myself tended to use Google or Bing to look for content on our website. Right now, I only use our search function because it's really great. So we have a new search functionality. We have this Chatbot, which provides answers. It relies on a LLM model, and it uses this retrieval augmented generation thing. So it uses the content we have on the website, which is, and on other places like YouTube, etc. So which is really a ton of content in different formats to provide the answers. So this is basically what we did. And I think it simplifies really the access to our information, which is also very important because you're pushing out this membership or pushing the membership model more these days, enabling people to get access to all of our research in a very flexible manner. So I think if you have this membership, then you also should enable people to find what they need to get the answers they need. And talking to this virtual Martin clearly is one element in that, while the membership also offers a lot of other benefits, like the ability to talk to the real Martin even. Things like that, which may even be more interesting. But I think it makes very clear where I see AI. It's in that sense an augmenting intelligence. It helps people to do things better, like it does in most areas where we use AI. An assistance system in a vehicle, which is usually in some way AI powered, basically augments the driver. It helps doing the job of a driver, in this case safety, for instance, better. So yes, that's there. To your point around will AI replace SaaS? I think it's a bit of an oversimplification. Sorry, Satcha. Because there are elements which you clearly can do better and different when it comes to looking up data, when it comes to accessing information, etc., searching for information, combining information out of different sources. There's a clear advantage. But there are a lot of things which are really form-based processes like invoicing, stuff like that, which are commonly run as SaaS, which probably will not be easily replaced. On the other hand, I can envision that, a lot of things we do with IT service management, for instance, basically at least will run through a very different interface. And I see some interesting startups these days, for instance, in the identity management space, which come up with, in fact, AI layers that allow you to get all what you need, like the report, the data, the stuff out of your world with a simple natural language query. So these are things, and we are also covering some of these vendors in our new format, the Rising Star format, where we look at vendors that are very innovative, young, or relatively small, but growing and have a very strong product market fit. And this is where we already covered one or two of these. Because I think this is another area where I see a huge potential for that. So I think it will not replace everything, but it will clearly have a huge impact, especially when it comes to getting data out of all these sources we have.
Yeah, I kind of feel like if Martin, and I came up, here's one thing you have to do. If you're in identity, you have to come up with the right acronym. So I came up with an acronym for you. I'm not saying it's the final one. I just thought of it. MARTN stands for Machine and AI Research Trained Neural Network.
Nice.
N was a tough one, right? Neural network was the IT buzz term for a while. It never became anything, right?
Yeah.
So
maybe you just say nerd.
There you go, trained nerd, because like a person. But here's my thought. So, you're taking KuppingerCole's complete body of research or whatever you have in terms of research, and then you let the AI loose on it in terms of learning it. Now, one thing, I don't know if you heard the study that happened recently where they said they took sick patients and they had a doctor analyze them and come up with, here's what illness you have and here's the treatment plan. They had an AI do it, and they had a doctor with an AI. And that was the order that the order that finishes the most accurate was AI was the most accurate. The doctor by himself or herself was the second most accurate. The third most accurate was the doctor with the AI. So potentially the doctor overruling the AI and inserting the wrong answer. And it got me thinking.
Or not really trusting the AI and things like that. I think for AI, we need a very proper quality assurance. So we need to look at the results. I personally believe that humans add a value to AI. I think there are things where AI is excellent. There are things where AI is horrible. So, for instance, when I use the bot on the KZ website, so then the links are correct. When I ask ChatGPT to generate a list of links to some research of KuppingerCole.com, then there's a bit of a tendency of ChatGPT to hallucinate and coming up with links where I would say, hey, these are great research topics. We should do that. But all of them lead to an 404 message, not found. So I think I would be careful with studies which say that the AI is always the best. I think a well-trained AI in medicine definitely provides a huge value, and so I think that there are really use cases where it's super powerful. To just bring up an anecdote, not everyone may like that anecdote or the theme of the anecdote, but I am in an age where you have to do a colonoscopy. I think it's the term, every couple of years. Some of you may have undergone that already. And I did this time being awake. So there was this huge monitor, there was the doctor, there was me, and I could visit it. And I could then see situations where the AI hinted on something. So there was nothing severe or anything by that, but the AI hinted on something which the doctor didn't spot. And so AI done right in medicine is a super powerful thing. And I found it super interesting to do this awake, because it's really interesting, I believe. But not everything likes the thought of doing a colonoscopy being awake. Anyway, I think that there's a huge value, but we also know, I think everyone of us using AI knows that sometimes results are better, sometimes they are worse. But I think if we should learn to make the right use of it. I think this is the point. If a good doctor will understand where it delivers value and where he or she still is needed with their own knowledge. And the other thing is creating something new, thinking beyond this is not really the domain of something that relies on existing data. So it's refactoring, combining, lesser than inventing. It can help in inventing, it can help in creating things, but I think there's still place for humans.
Yeah, I kind of feel like AI, if you give it enough information, it can learn the information and kind of have rote values and rote answers better than a human can. Just like a calculator can perform better than any human when it comes to doing mathematical equations. I also think, so I've thought about the Martin, the chatbot, and number one, it's available 24 hours a day, right? So your clients can get in there and they can ask you questions 24 hours a day. But I was interested to see whether you would say that the chatbot could replace the analyst in those terms, in terms of answering questions for your customers, or if you thought, because I think when it comes to doing the research
at a certain level, yes. I think that is where it's really about deep interaction workshops, really where it's about generating new ideas very, very rapidly, like I do, for instance, when we do when we run advisory workshops, etc., then it's really that I think it's for a lot of standard questions, wonderful and even complex standard questions. But clearly there's a point where the human interaction, the conversation, the thinking also adds to it. So I don't see that I will be replaced. I think it's great that there's something which does a lot of work, but there's also an area where I believe it's relatively difficult to replace a smart analyst. Hopefully, I'm smart, and so I think that's at the end. As of that, I think it's about using it the right way.
Yeah. So I wanted to switch topics a little bit because around the same time, November timeframe, you guys released the Leadership Compass for Access Governance. You released leadership compasses throughout the year, but specifically Access Governance, which is more or less like what some folks call identity governance. Doing recertification of access that's already been provisioned. This is a market that has been in existence for a long time. Is there anything exciting here?
I think the perspective on what someone perceives as exciting, they're very different. So clearly, probably exciting is a big term here. So basically what we did, we released a leadership compass on IGA, Identity Governance and Administration. Then we released another one on IAG, the Identity and Access Governance, which is basically a subset of the broader IGA field. And we just did a separate one because we still see in the market demand by a lot of organizations for a specialized IAG solution. Basically, we see even the demand for two types of IAG solutions. The general purpose IAG, so to speak, that are more on the IGA side of things, serving sort of every type of application to a certain level, providing role management, recertification, also usually some level of access request and approval, stuff like that, auditing, analytics, blah, blah, blah. And then we have the other specialized form, which really focuses on the ERPs, the line of business applications, so the stuff which is frequently called application access risk management or whatever they're ARM, AAC, application access control, application.
Talking like SAP GRC.
Something like SAP access control, which is commonly referred to as SAP GRC, but isn't named SAP GRC. But yes, you're totally correct. This is really funny in some way because this product, the name changed many years ago, but I would say it's still the vast majority calls it SAP GRC and not SAP Access Control. And by the way, SAP has a second product in this domain as well, the Cloud IAG, Cloud Identity Access Governance, which is the sort of the peer product to SAP Access Control or GRC, covering different systems in a bit of a different form. So for full coverage, you would probably need both. So we have this need for specialized solutions still, and that is the reason why we did a leadership compass on that. For instance, companies that have a legacy, or let's say long established, to avoid this ugly term legacy, a mature identity provisioning solution in place for many years, and they may see the need for quickly adding some more access governance capabilities, for instance, for regulatory compliance. For that type of organizations, there's a need for specialized IAG solutions.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of the new vendors in the space focus on IAG or access governance, identity governance, as a kind of stepping stone toward becoming a full-fledged IGA solution. I think that's what they're going at, but they tend to have some kind of specialized focus on governance. So it's the use of AI or the ability to drill down and say who has access to what data elements. It's something different than just roles and entitlement standard. The other end of the spectrum is large identity vendors or large vendors that have an identity product that are saying, oh, that's a gap in our solution. Now we need to do IGA. And from what I've seen, mostly they provide governance over what's in their data store, what's in their directory. So I think of Okta, I think of Microsoft. I'm actually wondering what your view is on how much progress Microsoft has made in this area. To the extent that where are they heading and how far are they into that journey?
Yeah, so I think we must not underestimate Microsoft. Never a good idea. I think history tells that Microsoft is is enduring also in what they are doing. So they have a long-term strategy, and identity and security is a very important field of business nowadays for Microsoft. When you look at the Entra suite of products, the PureView products, etc., it's really, I think, about 40 plus products they have in the identity and security space that also contribute quite significantly to Microsoft revenue. And Microsoft has a ton of developers working on these products. So they're working on that. I think we should be just clear that Microsoft, as some of the other large vendors, don't have the strategy of deep integration with a lot of proprietary other solutions. So they usually rely on standards or partners, external parties, doing the deep integration with some exceptions, which I think is fair, and I think which leads also to solutions that might be very, very capable for certain types of organizations, certain types of sizes of organizations, certain types of complexity, but also leaves room for others, for specialists that provide more capabilities, more depths, etc. So when I look at most of the end user organizations I talk with, then many of these have Microsoft or also Google or someone else in place from the very large sort of IT vendors, software vendors, but usually complement this in certain defined areas with other solutions, especially when these are large organizations. Then this is very common. I think this also fits very well. So we were just yesterday, so given the time of the recording, so just mid-January, we released our newest version of our Identity Fabric and of our IAM reference architecture. And I think these are paradigms and approaches that clearly show how that you usually will have more than one component, and that orchestration, that integration is a key element. So also for our upcoming leadership compass on identity fabrics, which will be published around EIC, I'm currently working on that. Identity orchestration gets a much higher value, because at the end of the day, even while when you say, some say this is whatever my preferred vendor, you usually will have other components from the past or to fill gaps. And then orchestration is a very essential capability to bring all these bits and pieces together. Also, sometimes to have fallback solutions. So what happens if your primary IDP goes down for a while, or if you need to move away from your primary IDP, have your fallback that at least helps your critical applications running. Yeah,
I mean, that's a basic pillar of business continuity, right? Is that question everything. So you mentioned there that you have a piece coming out. If you provide us a link, we can put it in the show notes. Martin, you've been super generous with your time. I did have one other question, which I was going to ask broadly, but I'm going to narrow it down. And so we're sitting here January 20th, look ahead to 2025, but I'm only going to ask you to pick out like one thing to really focus on. What is one of the hallmarks of 2025 that in 2026, we're going to say 2025 was the year of you fill in the blank?
Okay. What is the hottest theme? I think very visible non-human identity management. A lot of stuff going on there. So you could argue that also came up in 2024 already. I think we'll see more around policy-based access. We will see. This is maybe the 2026 thing, decentralized identity, when all the wallets, the EU digital identity wallets come out. So a couple of themes there. So is there anything totally entirely new? I think where we see maybe from the things we don't have on the radar that much yet, that is something we already touched. I think we will see a ton of innovation when it comes to natural language interfaces for existing types of applications, also in identity management and cybersecurity, etc., where we have either separate solutions or layers on top that allow us to simplify a lot of tasks by just saying, oh, I need access to that, and not searching for which roles and entitlements do I need. This is my task. I want to do the task. Give me the access. And then the system asks the manager, oh, is this already something Martin should be allowed to do? Oh, only for the next 3 months. He's just a temporary replacement. Blob, done. That will be, I think, probably for the things we don't have that much on the radar, will be one of the areas that will be big in 2025, beyond the stuff we commonly have on our radar already, which also, by the way, will raise some interesting questions, like least privilege for AI or for agentic AI. So, and that will be something which is very interesting, because it depends on in which context is the agent working, for which purpose. There are a lot of elements which will make this way more dynamic, I would say. So what is the least privilege needed to answer a question in a rightful manner for Martin? I think no one thought about this before, at least also I didn't. But I think this will be a really interesting area for IAM.
I didn't think about it in terms of least privilege for AI, but I've been really focused on, okay, well, how do you secure the AI? So you're the CEO, somebody else is an analyst in your company. Do they have access to the same data today? No. With AI, how will AI determine what data Martin can access, or one of your employees?
Yeah, that's the one thing, and the other thing is, how do we ensure, if you have agentic AI that is used by a lot of people, how do we ensure that we don't have super users there which are way too powerful? So how do we ensure that this all is kept under control? I think this entire field, I tend to call it A-identity. So the intersection of AI and identity is still pretty much a wide space on our technology map. We see a lot of startups around AI security nowadays, but I think we need startups around AI identity.
It seems to me that the technology, the functionality is going to blaze way past security. So it happened with cloud infrastructure, I think. And I think it'll happen again. I think the fallback will be some sort of leveraging legacy permissions, which we already know are not good enough. I think that's maybe what you're referencing. You have these super users, system administrators. So does that mean the system administrator can start using AI to find out all kinds of information about the company, or information that they shouldn't have access to?
Even think about someone having access to the AI Which, by the way, brings us back to the initial theme. Verified identities. So is it really Martin using the AI? And what is the AI supposed to do in the context of Martin? And if it's not Martin, or if someone is using the AI in different contexts, there might be way more information that is gathered, even if the AI is sort of constrained in what it can do in the context of the individual. I think this is a very interesting field to think about for 2025.
Yeah, I was thinking the exact same thing of we started off the conversation with identity verification, and now we're ending it essentially with identity verification. And we talked about AI in the middle and a bunch of other stuff. And I was thinking the exact same thing is, this contextual awareness, this identity awareness of who is making the request, or maybe what is making the request, because it could be a non-human identity querying another non-human identity. What are the rules for the different data sets that each can have access to, and the types of queries it can make? And we're back to identity verification as, okay, well, how do we make sure whoever's on the other side of the phone, the API, the text, whatever it is authenticated to do that transaction and the type of transaction you're trying to do. I was thinking the exact same thing, Martin, when we were talking. Why don't we go ahead and wrap up? Martin, you have been generous with your time, but I do want to pick your brain for just a couple minutes. You started off mentioning Stuttgart. It is my first time to Germany, other than the Frankfurt airport on a way over to Chennai, India. So I'm not going to count that because I never left the airport. But if I'm going to Germany for the first time, and I know I'm going to be in Berlin for a week, what is something that I have to do as a first timer in Berlin? And then from there, would you recommend I go south to like Munich or Stuttgart, kind of go southwest, or go north and sort of Oslo and Copenhagen, or go west to like Brussels or Amsterdam or something like that? Like, what would be your recommendation?
Yeah, so it depends a bit of whether you want to stay in Germany, or whether you want to do Europe in 3 days or something like that. I think that is a bit the question. So I think many of the places you've mentioned, take Paris, or way more to the south, Rome, and all the other wonderful Italian towns, etc. They deserve more time. So I wouldn't try to squeeze in too much of that. I think when you're in Berlin and you say, okay, I stay within Germany. So I think the first question is, so for Jim, it's very clear. Jim needs to go south in Germany because Jim is into good German food, and the food on average becomes better on average when you go southwest in Germany. So probably I'll get some comments on that by people who live in other regions. But basically, I would say that is the direction southwest. In tendency, you have a lot of good restaurants in other areas as well, but so the standard and generic food. So if you go to the traditional local food, then I would say the Swabian food. And so this area around, that is probably the best one. That's where I live. By the way, so if you're into landscape, then there are plenty of nice places. But I think it's probably more that you say, okay, which towns are really beautiful to visit. They are clearly the typical touristic traditional towns, Heidelberg, Rothenburg, etc. If you like that, if you're up to that. As I've said, I'm a fan of Stuttgart. It's full of hidden secrets, which makes it a bit more difficult for visitors. So there are some wonderful things, Mercedes Museum, Porsche Museum, which are very visible. There's, for instance, the first TV tower that has been built out of concrete. So it is the first worldwide in Stuttgart. It's not the tallest anymore, but it's the first, and it ever will be the first. So things like that. Other towns, Hamburg is great. I learned to laugh during the pandemic when we weren't allowed to travel abroad. I learned to laugh some areas of the Baltic Sea, but that's probably more for when you want to do a bit of a longer vacation at the coast. There's this region which is called Fischland Dachs Zingst, very complicated. Basically, it has been 3 islands which converged over time due to floods, etc., which is a wonderful area. So really a lot of things to be. Munich, yes, no doubt, can be very interesting. So I think a lot of interesting places, and it really depends a bit on what your preferences are, how much time you have, what you want to see, and to you and also the ones listening to the podcast, if you want travel tips to Germany, which are biased, sure. I admit that I'm biased, and my bias goes a bit towards Stuttgart and some other towns. Then feel free to reach out to me.
Martin,
that's a fact. If you go a bit further, my one of my absolute favorite towns is Paris.
Martin, will EIC be back in Munich in the future?
I have no clue. So I'm not in the organization team of the EIC anyway. So I don't know whether we will go back to Munich. Really, no clue about it.
Okay. Jeff, I guess my input, I've been to Germany a couple of times, but I've been to Frankfurt. But one thing that stood out to me that I know I'm going to do is go to, I think I'm getting the term right, like a beer hall, with the raised tables, and they bring out these big glasses of beer. And it's a very German experience. There are beer halls in the US, and some of them are very much like that. But I figure like if you get the real experience in Germany and then you go back to the US, you can compare and contrast.
I have to admit, I think the last time I have been in a beer hall probably is about 15 to 18 years ago. And the second last, probably more than 3 decades or so. So I think they are you find them, especially in some of the Bavarian areas, where if the weather is good, always would prefer a beer garden over the beer hall. So when you can go outside, that's really cool. But they are probably a bit more Bavarian overall.
You're giving me a lot to think about here.
Yeah. And you may meet more Americans there than Germans.
That's what I was wondering, if it's more of like a tourist thing than a local thing.
I think it started as a local thing. Let's phrase it like that. It's
been taken over, but gotcha. Okay. All right. Why don't we go ahead and leave it for this week? We don't want to get anyone else in trouble here. Martin, you're always so generous with your time, and really do appreciate you joining us. And again, thank you for the invite out to Berlin. We're looking forward to seeing you in a couple months, and finally give you a fist bump of gratitude for being on the show so many times and sharing your knowledge. It'll be an interesting year, with between AI, identity verification, and everything in between. And I'm continually excited by all the innovations that are still happening in the identity space. I think there's this idea, it's like, oh, well, we've been doing identity for so long. Like, where does it go to next? There's always something new to learn. Yeah. Something's going to change, et cetera. So it keeps it fresh, which is always what I enjoy about this industry. Yeah. So thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you for inviting me, and looking forward to finally meet you in person in Berlin.
Oh, we will hope to not disappoint, right, Jim?
Yes.
Let's go ahead and wrap it there. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching and or listening. We'll have links in our show notes for a discount code for EIC, as well as connecting with Martin on LinkedIn. You can share your thoughts about the current state of beer halls or beer gardens or anything else I'm sure that Martin has talked about today. And you can find us on the web, idacpodcast.com. And so thanks for watching and or listening, and we'll talk with you all in the next one.
Thank you. Bye.
You've been listening to Identity at the Center. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit the website at identityatthecenter.com. See you next time on Identity at the Center.